Welcome to the short presentation of the DEMIA Quintiq Logistics Planner Last Mile solution. In the following minutes, we will have a look at how this solution supports your business process. In order to do that, we will follow 4 steps that should simulate what happens throughout the night. At first, we will start the order retrieval. We will then continue with loading all the parcels into the vans. We will receive the updates from the loading process and finish the demonstration by starting the tours. But before we have a look at this business process, let's have a look at what we see on the screen. We can see a set of KPIs here on the left-hand side that shows the current status of the plan. In it, we see the total cost, the number of drivers, and for instance, also the total mileage that we plan to drive throughout that day. The Map Control Center allows us to get a very quick overview on the current status of the plan. So what you can see here on the map right now is the set of all addresses that have a delivery today. As you can see, we are in the area of Liverpool and Manchester in the UK, but we can also show different kinds of information on this map. So for instance, by clicking problematic, we can see, also explained in the legend here in the lower left corner, that currently no problem exists for all the shipments that we've planned. Interestingly, we can also click on the static area button, and the static area button shows which driver is actually delivering which area. So in the list here on the right-hand side, we can see a set of drivers with some information attached to them, which is how many stops do they do, how many miles do they drive, how many pounds does this trip cost. And if I click, for instance, on Andy here, the map focuses on what Andy needs to do. And you can nicely see that Andy only delivers to his area, which is indicated that all the dots are having the same color. If I click on Colin, you can see that he has a different area and all the dots are orange now. We could also have a look at the different products that we have to deliver. So let's zoom in a little bit. And what you can see for Colin is that basically, as explained in the legend, he has a couple of pickups. He has some time-critical things he has to deliver, but also quite a lot of standard deliveries that need to be delivered from our depot, which is located here, right between Liverpool and Manchester. We can also have a look at the route that is currently planned by selecting the Show Routes button, and you can nicely see how the system helped to sequence all the 63 stops that Colin has to do that day in order to minimize the duration and the distance he has to drive. But let's zoom out again and have a look at all the drivers that we need to plan. I can do that by deselecting the driver, and let's focus on the business process for now. In order to do that, we will see that in our process, the status KPIs here on the lower right corner will be updated accordingly. But let's start with our process. So in order to do that, let's have a look at the problematic stops again. As we can see right now, the current status of the plan shows that we do not have any problem at all. But let's create some problems by clicking on the Start Order Retrieval button. And that actually triggers an interface that continuously checks whether there are new orders that are coming in. And as you can see now, we have just received information about a set of new orders, which you can nicely see here to be indicated with the blue dots. It's all over the area. And that shows that we have received some new orders. Again, you can see we have received some, so we are now at 42 shipments that are not planned. But what we can do is we can ask our optimizer to actually plan these orders. And you can nicely see now that the optimizer basically planned in most of these shipments immediately. But you can also see that in the meantime, we received another small batch of shipments that needs to be updated, and what the optimizer is now doing in the background. And you can nicely see that with this status button is it tries to plan in all the orders which exist. So you can see that currently we also have a specific driver, which is John, who in the current status of the plan has some late shipments, but in the course of the optimization, we will see that the optimizer will find a better solution for John, which, for instance, you can also nicely see here on the map, not anymore, so the two red dots here on the map now vanished, and John has a trip that he can actually properly go. So now there are a few shipments that are left unplanned, so the optimizer has taken that into account, but what you can see is that it is a continuous process in order to find the best solution. After the optimizer is done, we can see that we have created a plan which has a certain cost, but which also has all the routes that are released, which we can nicely see here in this overview of the drivers. And when hovering over the status bar, we can see that all of the drivers have been published for loading, which means that the sorting machines or the sorting process can start now accordingly. In order to simulate the progress that is made with the sorting, we can now start our second step in the business process, which is the start loading. What we will see is that step by step, some of our drivers have finished their loading, which you can nicely see in the KPI here on the bottom, which is updated, but which you can also see nicely in the list of drivers, where step by step more drivers have finished their load, and submit that information to our system such that we can, as a planner, have a good overview on the current status of our loading process. So after a while, we can see that all the drivers actually have finished the loading process, so the status for them has switched to scanning finished. However, during the scanning process, it could be that there are some updates to the plan that need to be done. In order to highlight that, let me ask a filter that I have created before, which is a filter on the load update, which filters our whole set of drivers to two drivers, which are John and Sami. By clicking on the static area, you can also see that John is responsible for the yellow dots and Sami is responsible for the green dots. You can also see that John needs to work 10.5 hours, while Sami only needs to work a bit more than 7.5 hours. And John actually decided that day, or well, he didn't decide it, but he told Sami, can't we just split our load a bit more? And this is what they did on the shop floor. In order to simulate that, let's ask the button receive updates from loading, which of course happens in the background of the system continuously. And what you can see now is that the times actually have more or less become equal. So John now needs to work 1 hour less and Sami needs to take over that part. You also could see that all the information has been updated accordingly, and you get an interesting constraint indication here saying that there is a shipment which is outside the driver's area. In this case, Sasami actually, and this is something you can nicely see on the map, now has his own shipments, so the greenish ones, but also takes over a few of the white ones. And you can nicely see that also by looking at the route, that on his way to his area, he delivers these 2 stops, and on his way back to the depot, he delivers the rest, depending on the time windows, of course. So as a planner, and let me remove that filter for now, as a planner we can then see all the updates that have been done. You can see that Sami is actually the only person that has a shipment which is not, or number of shipments which is not from his area. So we as a planner could say for now, let's select all of the drivers again. Let's do a right mouse click and say, let's publish this for execution, that the drivers can actually start. And what will happen is that the status in front of each of the drivers will change to the next status, which is published for execution. And that means that we can now let our drivers start. And for this, we have added here this button that when we click it once, we can see that a number of drivers has started. So this can be the first shift that we have. You can see that 51% of the drivers have started now, which is nicely indicated by this icon. When we click again, then the second shift basically starts, which now shows 95% have started. And when we click it the last time, we can see that the rest of the drivers have started. And with this, we consider our job done, and this also finalizes this short demonstration of the business process for our drivers in our depot in the Liverpool-Manchester area. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.